So, today we are taking a deep dive into something that is honestly pretty mind-bending. We're going to explore this massive, almost hidden boundary between the things we actually know as objective facts and the things we just, well, assume because they were handed down to us.
Right, and it's a boundary that we cross every single day without even realizing it.
Exactly. So we've got a fascinating stack of research today centered around a philosophical and scientific framework. It's called the time traveler's paradox. And our mission today is to unpack this massive thought experiment about human belief.
We're basically trying to figure out why our brains literally fight us, like physically fight us, when we try to change our minds.
Yeah, which is wild.
Mhm.
And ultimately, we want to give you a completely new framework for testing your own deepest convictions.
It's such a critical distinction to make, especially right now. I mean, we are constantly bombarded with information, so separating testable reality from inherited assumption it's essentially the ultimate cognitive survival skill at this point.
Wait, before we jump into the mechanics of that, we should probably clarify for everyone why the research calls this the time traveler's paradox in the first place.
Right, good point. So think about it this way. If a time traveler went back to, say, the year 1200 and successfully convinced just one major society that the divine right of kings was a complete myth,
Oh, wow, yeah. That would change everything.
the entire trajectory of modern civilization would just shift. The political borders, the economic systems, the wars, literally everything that followed would be different.
Because the whole foundation would be gone.
Exactly. And the paradox highlights this really fragile truth. Much of what we consider to be the firm, unchangeable reality of our modern world isn't built on physics or biology. It is built entirely on inherited cultural assumptions that could have easily gone in a completely different direction.
Which sets up this incredible thought experiment from the source material that we're going to explore. Because to really isolate those inherited assumptions, I want you to try and imagine waking up tomorrow morning and your intelligence is completely intact.
Right, you're not a zombie.
No, no. Your ability to speak, your professional skills, your understanding of math and physics, all of that is exactly the same. But you have zero memory of your personal ideologies.
Zero.
Yeah, your inherited beliefs are just wiped completely clean. It's like the ultimate reset button.
It really is. It's like a global amnesia, but it is a highly specific kind of amnesia. Because you haven't lost your capacity to reason.
Right.
The collective testable knowledge of the human race is still right there. Gravity still functions. We still know how to build a bridge, how to split an atom, how to cultivate crops.
The science is intact.
Exactly. The hardware of the human mind is fully operational, but all of the cultural software has just been uninstalled overnight.
So no one remembers their nationality. No one remembers their political party or their preferred economic system. You wouldn't even remember the historical grudges your ancestors held.
Gone. Even your family's holiday traditions, all gone.
And that forces the core question of this entire exercise, right? If humanity had to rebuild civilization from that exact moment of global amnesia, would we rebuild it the same way? Like, would we draw the exact same borders on the map?
I mean, I highly doubt it.
Right. Because without the historical momentum of, this is my land because my grandfather fought your grandfather for it, why would you draw the same arbitrary line across a river or a mountain range?
You wouldn't. I mean, we would likely begin asking completely different questions based on, say, resource distribution and logical efficiency rather than historical tribalism.
Which makes sense.
And this touches on a fundamental reality of human development from the text, something often referred to as the blank slate theory.
Oh, right.
Now, human beings aren't entirely blank slates. We obviously have genetic predispositions. But when it comes to ideology, we arrive with absolutely nothing. A child is not born believing that a free market economy is inherently superior to a command economy.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yes.
Because if I'm understanding this correctly, is it kind of like a laptop fresh out of the box?
That's a good way to look at it, yeah.
Like, the hardware is highly advanced, you have a fast processor and great memory, but society has to install an operating system before the computer can actually interact with the world.
That is a highly accurate analogy. Because human beings are born so uniquely vulnerable compared to other animals, we don't have, natural armor or the instinct to immediately run from predators. Our evolutionary advantage is neuroplasticity.
The ability to learn and adapt.
Precisely. Our brains are designed to rapidly download the rules of whatever environment we happen to be born into. Your parents, your educational system, your local culture. They are all programming that initial operating system.
And once that operating system is installed, it just runs in the background.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't feel like something we learned. It just feels like reality.
Yeah, because you view everything through the operating system, so you rarely notice the operating system itself. It becomes this invisible lens through which you judge what is logical, what is moral, and what is normal.
I do have to push back a little on this, though, on behalf of anyone listening.
Sure.
Because if we recognize that our deepest cultural beliefs are just, well, installed software, isn't there a massive danger in just deleting the OS?
How do you mean?
Like, if we wake up tomorrow and start questioning every single tradition and societal rule, wouldn't we just collapse into total chaos? I mean, tradition actually has value in holding society together, right?
Yeah. Oh, you are touching on a very real fear, and it is a crucial distinction to make here. Recognizing that a belief is inherited is not the same as saying the belief is wrong or useless.
Okay, so it's not about just tearing it all down.
Not at all. The goal of this framework isn't destruction, it is examination. Tradition often contains deep, hard-won historical wisdom. A society that destroys all its traditions overnight would absolutely collapse.
So we aren't taking a sledgehammer to the laptop.
No. We are acknowledging that because these ideas are inherited assumptions, they must be tested. We shouldn't blindly accept them, but we also shouldn't blindly reject them just because they're old. If an inherited tradition or societal structure is genuinely useful and based on sound principles, it will easily survive being questioned. It's really about moving from unconscious acceptance to conscious evaluation.
But, and here's where it gets really interesting, if the goal is just conscious evaluation, why is it so incredibly hard to do?
What do you mean by hard?
Well, if you've ever tried to change your own mind about a deeply held political or social belief, or, or try to convince someone else to change theirs, it feels like you are hitting a physical brick wall.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not just a polite disagreement. People get visibly agitated, they get angry. It's exhausting.
And there's a profound biological reason for that reaction. This is where we have to look at the actual neuroscience of belief that the research brings up.
The neuroscience. So it's actually happening in our biology.
Yes. The human brain is a marvel, but it is also an incredible liability when it comes to energy consumption. The brain only makes up about 2% of your total body weight, but it consumes roughly 20% of your body's energy.
Wow. That is a massive metabolic overhead.
It is. And because of that massive overhead, the brain evolved with a primary directive: conserve energy at all costs. Over millions of years of evolution, wasting calories could literally mean starvation.
Right, because we didn't always have a drive-through on every corner.
Exactly. So the brain developed mechanisms to automate as much behavior and thought as possible. When you do something repeatedly, or when you are taught a cultural narrative over and over from childhood, your brain physically changes to make that thought process cheaper.
Wait, how does a thought process become physically cheaper?
Through a process called myelination. When neurons fire together repeatedly, the pathways between them get coated in a fatty substance called myelin.
Myelin, okay.
Yeah.
Hmm?
Think of myelin like the rubber insulation on an electrical wire. It stops the signal from leaking out and makes the neural transmission incredibly fast and highly efficient.
So when I encounter an idea that aligns with my worldview, my brain is just like sending a signal down a well-insulated high-speed wire. It takes almost zero effort.
Exactly. And the region of the brain that manages this automation is the basal ganglia. You can think of the basal ganglia as the brain's autopilot.
The autopilot.
Right. It handles everything from tying your shoes to reciting your favorite cultural dogmas. When the basal ganglia is in charge, you aren't really thinking, you are just executing a pre-programmed script.
Which perfectly explains why driving your daily commute feels like a blur. Like you pull into your driveway and realize you don't actually remember the last 10 miles.
Your basal ganglia was literally driving the car.
That's wild. He was just running the script.
It is highly efficient and metabolically cheap. But what happens when you encounter information that contradicts your deeply held beliefs?
I'm guessing the autopilot shuts off.
Yes. What happens when you try to critically examine the operating system? You can no longer use the basal ganglia. You are forcing the brain to route the signal away from those cheap myelinated pathways and up into the prefrontal cortex.
And the prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that handles, like, complex analysis and critical thinking, right?
Yes. But the prefrontal cortex is an absolute energy hog. It requires massive amounts of glucose to function.
Ah, so it's expensive.
Very. When you force your brain to question a core belief, you are essentially demanding a metabolic spike. Your brain resists this. It floods your system with stress hormones to try and make you stop.
Wait, really? Stress hormones.
Yeah, because from an evolutionary standpoint, you are wasting precious calories on abstract thought. Your body thinks you're going to starve.
So, if relying on the basal ganglia is like driving your daily commute on complete, relaxing autopilot, using the prefrontal cortex to question a core belief is like trying to navigate a strange, chaotic city in a rainstorm with no GPS.
And your brain is constantly screaming at you to just pull over and go back to the familiar highway.
Wow. I mean, we don't resist changing our minds because we're stubborn. We resist it because our brains are literally trying to save energy.
Exactly. It is a biological imperative. The familiarity of an inherited belief feels like objective reality, but quite often it is just biological energy conservation.
It's just your brain being lazy to keep you alive.
Basically, your brain is telling you, hey, we already have a highly efficient pathway for this concept. Please do not burn glucose trying to build a new one.
So what does this all mean? Are we just doomed to repeat these historical loops? If our brains are literally hardwired to reject new ideas just to save calories, how did we ever figure out that the Earth wasn't flat?
That is the pivotal question, because when an entire society gives in to that metabolic resistance, you get trapped in historical errors that can last for centuries. History is essentially a graveyard of unquestioned belief.
Yeah, the text highlights some pretty wild historical examples of this, like the belief that the Earth was the center of the universe, or the belief that diseases were caused by evil spirits or bad air, what they call miasma theory, rather than, microorganisms.
We really have to remember that these weren't fringe theories believed by uneducated people. The Ptolemaic model of the universe, the idea that everything revolved around the Earth, was accepted as absolute fact by the most brilliant mathematicians and astronomers for over 1,000 years.
That is the part that is so jarring. I think we have this tendency to look back at ancient civilizations and think, well, they just weren't as smart as we are.
Oh, absolutely.
But they had the exact same brain capacity. They were just as capable of complex thought. So why did they get it so wrong for so long?
Because the Ptolemaic model actually worked well enough for their immediate needs. I mean, it allowed them to predict planetary movements with reasonable accuracy. It was a functional assumption.
It did the job well enough.
Right. And because it was deeply embedded in their cultural and religious operating system, questioning it was both socially dangerous and metabolically exhausting.
It was too expensive.
Exactly. They accepted it not because it was objectively true, but because they rarely, if ever, subjected it to rigorous prefrontal cortex examination.
Which should honestly terrify us today. I mean, if incredibly intelligent people sincerely believe things that later turned out to be completely backward, it is a statistical guarantee that some of our modern assumptions are also totally wrong. We just don't know which ones yet.
It should humble us deeply. The fundamental argument here is that the greatest obstacle to human progress is not ignorance. Ignorance is simply a lack of data.
Right, you just learn something new and move on.
Exactly. When you are ignorant and you receive new data, you can correct your course. The true danger, the ultimate obstacle, is certainty without examination.
Because the moment you become 100% certain that you have all the answers, your curiosity just shuts off.
It vanishes. Certainty is a biological relief because it means you never have to use your prefrontal cortex on that topic again.
The basal ganglia wins.
Right. But when curiosity disappears on a societal level, human progress slows to a crawl. This is why highly rigid belief systems, whether they are political, economic, or religious, they are uniquely vulnerable to stagnation.
Because they claim to have the final truth.
Precisely. If a system dictates that the mere act of questioning its core tenets is a form of betrayal or weakness, it completely short-circuits the mechanism that produces wisdom.
You are essentially outlawing the use of the analytical brain. You are legally mandating that everyone stay in their basal ganglia.
Which is why the scientific method is so revolutionary, not just as a tool for discovering facts, but as an entirely new intellectual operating system.
Right. Science is basically the ultimate counterexample to this certainty trap, because science constantly asks, were we wrong?
Exactly. Science isn't just a collection of facts, it's a way of thinking. It is a structured discipline of overriding the brain's desire for certainty. It's a system built entirely around the question, under what conditions would I be wrong?
It's a forced metabolic workout. Science actually rewards you for finding flaws in the established model. Like when a telescope provides new data that shatters a 1,000-year-old assumption about the solar system, the scientific framework doesn't say, burn the telescope.
No, it says, okay, our previous model was incomplete. Let's do the exhausting work of updating it. Imagine if science refused to question itself. We would still believe the Earth was the center of the universe.
Yeah, it's wild to think about.
True wisdom isn't about never changing your mind. It is about maintaining the flexibility to change your mind when better evidence presents itself. The most advanced minds are the ones that have trained themselves to tolerate the discomfort of being wrong.
Okay, so how do we actually bring this into our own lives? Because we can't all be astrophysicists constantly testing the laws of the universe, you know?
No, definitely not.
How do we take the scientific way of thinking and apply it to our own deeply installed everyday assumptions? The source text offers a really specific framework for this called the time traveler's commitment.
Yes. It is a set of foundational rules for evaluating any belief, and it's designed to strip away the context of tradition or emotional attachment. It demands that we look at ideas strictly on their own structural merit.
The first rule is fascinating. It says, do not believe something just because it is ancient. We have this huge bias that if an idea has survived for 2,000 years, it must contain some ultimate truth.
Right, the appeal to tradition.
Yeah. But as we just discussed with the geocentric model, an idea can survive for thousands of years simply because it's a very sticky habit, and no one wants to burn the calories to challenge it.
Exactly. And conversely, the commitment states you must not reject an idea simply because it is new. Novelty does not invalidate truth, just as antiquity does not guarantee it.
And the next one is tough, especially in the age of social media. It says, do not accept an idea just because millions of people believe it.
That's a hard one for our brains to process.
It really is. Popularity is a metric of viral transmission, not a metric of factual accuracy. Millions of people believed in miasma theory. It didn't stop them from getting sick.
And equally important, do not dismiss an idea because only a few people understand it. Truth is not dependent on a democratic consensus.
Right.
The ultimate metric, the only metric that truly matters in this framework is, what does the evidence reveal? Civilization must be built on ideas that are strong enough to survive rigorous, uncomfortable questioning.
If I'm understanding this correctly, it's kind of like doing a massive structural inspection on a house.
Oh, I like that. How so?
Well, imagine your mind is a house you've lived in your whole life, and your deepest beliefs, your politics, your worldview, your cultural norms, they are the load-bearing walls. Now, you don't just grab a sledgehammer and start blindly knocking down walls to see what happens.
Right, that's how the roof caves in.
Exactly. But you absolutely must walk through that house occasionally, pull back the drywall, and inspect the wood.
You have to look for termites. You have to ensure the foundation isn't rotting out from under you.
Yes. Because if a load-bearing wall is completely hollow inside, you want to discover that on a calm, sunny afternoon while you have the tools to fix it. You do not want to discover it when a massive storm hits and the whole structure collapses on top of you.
That is precisely the goal, because the blank slate theory proves that our allegiance to a specific ideology isn't written into our DNA. It is installed. And what is installed can be re-examined.
It can be audited.
Yes, audited. That willingness to ask difficult questions about the walls that hold up our reality is the genesis of every truly advanced civilization. The profound shift in mindset that this research advocates is moving away from the constant debate over what do we believe, and instead asking what have we never thought to question.
That is such a subtle shift, but it completely changes the rules of engagement. When you start looking for the invisible assumptions in your life, you realize they are literally everywhere.
And it requires immense vigilance, because the brain will always try to pull you back into the comfort of the status quo.
It always wants to go back to the basal ganglia.
Always.
So if we look back at the journey we've taken today, we started with that global amnesia thought experiment, wiping the slate clean to reveal just how much of our identity is inherited cultural software.
Right.
And we explored how human neuroplasticity allows us to download this operating system from our environment, for better or worse.
And then we looked at the biological reality of why updating that software is so physically painful. The basal ganglia automates our beliefs to conserve precious metabolic energy, forcing us into a state where critical thinking physically exhausts us.
But we also saw the catastrophic dangers of giving in to that exhaustion. Certainty without examination leaves societies trapped in historical errors, defending flat earth theories simply because they are familiar and easy.
Exactly. And the only way out is to adopt that scientific mindset, a disciplined commitment to following the evidence, even when it forces our prefrontal cortex into overdrive.
It's time to do some metabolic heavy lifting. You have a basal ganglia running your deepest convictions on autopilot right now, and it is up to you to check those load-bearing walls.
And the research actually leaves us with a haunting exercise. It asks a question that forces this perspective shift almost instantly.
But what is it?
It asks, if you had been born in a different country, to parents of a different faith, living under a completely different economic system, what would you believe today? And what does that alternate reality tell you about the absolute certainty of the beliefs you hold right now?
Wow. That really exposes just how fragile our certainties are. I
Hmm?
mean, if your geography dictates your reality, then how objective is your reality, really?
It's a tough pill to swallow.
It is. But I actually want to build on that with one final, totally new thought for you to take away today.
Okay.
If you recognize that your own beliefs are, in large part, just an installed operating system based on the random chance of where you were born, what does that mean for the next generation?
Oh, that's a great question.
Right. Think about the very next piece of advice, the next tradition, or the next absolute truth that you decide to pass down to a child. Are you handing them heavily tested, structurally sound knowledge that you've rigorously examined?
Or are you just hitting copy-paste?
Exactly. Are you just forcing your own unexamined, metabolically exhausted assumptions onto their brand new, beautifully blank slate?
It's heavy. But the future depends entirely on our willingness to question the operating system.